During World War I, the Secretary of the Navy became convinced that the enlistment of women was essential to meet the manpower requirements for the Navy and Marines. For the first time, women enlisted into the military as Navy yeomanettes and Marines. They served primarily as nurses, clerks, and communication operators. They served in the United States as well as abroad from 1898 to 1901. General Pershing requested 5,000 military women to support the military in Europe. The War Department refused to enlist women, but instead recruited 5,000 unskilled men and 5,000 women as volunteers. Since they were volunteers, Pershing had no administrative controls and no legal power over them, making them completely unmanageable. The Army War Department issued this statement: with careful supervision, women employees may be permitted in camps with no moral injury either to themselves or to the soldiers. For example, at Camp Grant, near Fort Sheridan, Illinois, student nurses were carefully segregated from men. They obviously believed in physical fitness, though in this photo, the Camp Grant student nurses did drill and ceremony in uniforms borrowed from men because uniforms were not provided for women. During World War I, women received much of the same training as men, whether it is in parades, at hospitals, or in gas chambers, as in this photo taken at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Women, of course, served overseas. Beyond their traditional roles, women also served as radio operators, messengers, stenographers, clerks, truck drivers, ordnance workers, telephone operators, and many other non-combat roles. In 1917, when America entered the war, the former National American Women's Suffrage Association president, Anna Howard Shaw, was fundamental in marshaling women for service. Along with the National American Women's Suffrage Association, other like organizations stood up and worked towards making sure that women were still women and to step up and help fill the gaps on the home front that were left by the men going off to the European theater. Women serving in uniform during World War I looked very different in other countries. Russia had a women's battalion of death founded by Maria Bashkarova. Bulgaria and Romania are just two other examples of where women were allowed to serve as combat troops. Following the war, at the Armistice Parade in Paris, American Red Cross nurses, led by Colonel Julia Stimson, 1st Army Nurse Corps Chief, proudly marched in the celebration of the Allied victory. During the interwar period, women generally were not part of the American military. This return to so-called normalcy was punctuated by some planners, such as Anita Phipps, who was employed by the War Department to demonstrate the Army's meager interest in women, and Major Everett Hughes, an early planner who recommended incorporating vast number of women into the military. There was much discussion about the use of women during World War II. This poster portrays them in their traditional roles, an operator talking to the boys in uniform. Major Hughes's Women Army Air Corps was signed into law in May 1942 as the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps. As Congress considered the passage of the WAC bill, Army Chief of Staff George Marshall recognized the need for women to meet manpower shortages. Here is the cover from a magazine article on the 1st WAC Battalion at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. The sentiments of the opposition are clearly expressed by a congressman who said, "I think it is a reflection on the courageous manhood of the country to pass a law inviting women to join the armed forces in order to win a battle. Take the women into the armed service, who then will do the cooking, the washing, the mending, and the humble, homey tasks to which every woman has devoted herself. Think of the humiliation. What has become of the manhood of America?" In contrast, note the comment of Albert Speer, Hitler's weapons production chief. "How wise you were to bring your women into your military and into your labor force. Had we done that initially as you did, it could have well affected the course of the war. We would have found out, as you did, that women were equally effective and for some skills superior to males." From the beginning of the auxiliary status, the WAC did not work. There were disadvantages for the women. They did not receive equal pay to their male counterparts. They did not receive entitlement for dependents as the men did. They had no rank. Overseas, they did not have the same legal protection as men. However, publicity still focused on the traditional women's role. In this photo, you can see a WAC getting her hair done, WACs playing games, in a shower, almost like a soap commercial. Notice her lipstick stays on in the shower, or WACs as bathing beauties, or in romantic interludes with GIs. In June 1943, because of the problems of auxiliary status, the WAC was converted to the Women's Army Corps. They had a new organization, but the same roles. Women worked at the mess hall and worked in the motor pool. You can still see the romanticized viewpoint that the WAC used to recruit women. Overseas, women continued in auxiliary roles. Notice, rather than combat, women were featured here attending religious services. Although black women were allowed in the WAC, for example, 400 whites and 40 black women were selected from 30,000 applicants. Like their male counterparts, they were kept in segregated units. The media referred to the Army women as wackies and concentrated on bras and bosoms. Some of the media coverage suggested scandalous, immoral behavior overseas. American women served wherever the war took place. They did on the beaches of Anzano and Normandy. Here, women arrived close behind the front lines a few weeks after the invasion of Normandy. World War II institutionalized the role of women in the military, with the signing of the Women's Armed Service Integration Act, which President Truman signed into law on June 12, 1948. Even though many women served in uniform during World War II, many stayed at home and went to fill the jobs that the men left behind. We have Rosie the Riveter, who became an icon and helped spark women out of the home and into the workplace, breaking previous social mores and social norms. Thank you for watching.